You're listening to Scheduling Sin with me, Snowmill.
I will sit there and smirk, sit back in the corner outside, put my feet on a table, take a large glass of tonic water and drink it, sit back, light and smoke a fag, and smile to myself. Another one done.
Well, hello, Mrs. Snow.
Well, hello, Mr. Snow. How are you?
How are you today?
Oh, I'm just peachy keen. How are you?
I'm great. We have a phenomenal guest today.
We do.
Our guest today is Tina Vonteese, who is a regular on the Vanilla to Vixen podcast.
And she has recently joined our Discord, which I'm not going to lie to you, Tina. Mr. Snow was so excited and geeked out. He's like, Tina's in our Discord. He was so excited. So excited.
I honestly don't get starstruck very often, but I kind of did in this case. I'm not going to lie about that. I kind of did. I have so enjoyed listening to Tina on the Vanilla to Vixen podcast. She is a tea girl from the UK.
Yeah.
Has a phenomenal experience, a wonderful outlook, and I've had so much fun laughing and listening with her. And I'm just so excited she's on here with us today.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. What an honor itself. I mean, here I am on the other side of the ocean, and now I'm talking to the other side of the ocean.
Yeah.
And it just feels like it's next door, doesn't it?
You're a worldwide star, right? Like you were just over the UK and now you're worldwide. That's something. Look at you. Add that to the resume.
Well, I mean, if you add, perish the thought I should never mention about Australia, should I? I should never mention about New Zealand, Alaska. Some interesting people in Anchorage, isn't there? To actually be able to be allowed to talk to your fan base, because I understand you're very popular over there in the United States, aren't you?
We're getting there. Well, I think what's cool is I know Mr. Snow often looks at the data and the demographics, and I know we have listeners in several countries actually outside of the US and UK.
Well, it's amazing, isn't it, these days? But it's so refreshing as well to be able to talk openly about subjects like this without judgment, and for people to be able to listen privately if they need to and enlighten themselves with things that they've always wanted to ask questions about or wanted to find out about without that awkward, how can you put it, Reddit moment.
Why don't we start off with the story of Tina? Is T-girl the term that you prefer?
Yeah, T-girl suits me.
Is there a better term?
No, there isn't really, because T-girl is an ambiguous one that covers all multitude of sins. If you turn around and you say cross-dresser, you've got this whole image of, how can you put it, my name's Marcia and I wear a frock. Then you've got the sort of trans people where it's like, my name's Marcia and I identify as Marcia and I identify as female and I've got I'm having hormones and my dick's shrinking and I'm going to be a woman full time, thank you. And then you've got sort of the transvestites, which are, how can you put it? We're ladies, darling. We're ladies. We go for tea in the afternoons. We dress up in pretty silly frocks and we go to tea shops. We all say that we're ladies. Whereas tea girls, for example, are sort of, I am who I am during the day and I can transform and I can look bloody amazing. But at the same time, I'm not going to chop bits off and I'm not going to live my life full time as this, because if I did, I wouldn't be me and I wouldn't be her and I wouldn't be him. So I'm just happy being who I am, when I want to be, how I want to be. And that's why the T-girl term sort of came up. And it's a nice neutral one for people to use in clubs without offending anyone. In the sense being, if you are an event host or something like that, for example, if you use the term sort of T-girls, T-girls welcome, it's like an all-encompassing, covers all. Doesn't offend the people on transition, doesn't offend the people that just want to dress up and wear something nice and not necessarily go for all the makeup and everything else. Does that make sense?
It does. How did Tina come to be?
Oh, there's a question. So, okay, cast your mind back many, many, many years ago in a galaxy far away. 1963, my parents had a break from their how can one put it, productive elements, and decided to have a break because they wanted a girl. And so in 1963, I arrived, and I was another boy. But undeterred, they'd already picked the name. So my male name, you change one letter in it, it goes from the masculine to the feminine, or the feminine to the masculine. So that was an easy fix for them in that respect. But I was perfectly normal, healthy boy. Usual thing, 2 legs, 2 arms, head, that sort of thing, brain. And yes, pretty uneventful childhood. My father was working for the forces, I think we term, or the military forces. So he was away quite a bit. At that time, of course, people used to go away on exercises, that sort of thing, quite a bit. And it was a tradition that when the gentleman returned, these small people would be packed off to each other's houses for sleepovers so that the parents could reacquaint themselves, I think is the term. And because my father's position was quite, how can you put it, interesting, my mum had an amazing collection of lingerie, and she used to get lots and lots of makeup and perfume and things like that because of a thing called duty free.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I suppose I remember little flashbacks as a child, but it didn't mean anything weird to me. It was just mum used to get ready and she'd have these lovely silk stockings and couture lingerie and stuff like that. Didn't even register it, but you still have that flashback in your mind. And in all fairness, I've sort of looked at her photos from all the functions they used to attend, and she was a bit of a looker, He was punching well above his weight, I'll tell you that. Anyway, so of course, that sort of is something that's etched in my mind about style and everything else. So we used to go sleeping over and that sort of thing. And eventually we'd sort of, if it was a Friday night, we'd eventually come home on a Sunday morning, and mum and dad would be very happy and very cheerful. And hello, darlings, and all this business. It was wonderful. You had a nice time, baby. This was jolly good. Did you go anywhere? This was wonderful. And we'd all be like, yeah, the food was crap. But that was a tradition. So didn't really get any sort of feelings for cross-dressing or anything like that at that point in my life. And the usual onset of growing up happened, and I was lucky enough to be growing up in a time of the 80s, which meant that, for example, there was quite a large resurgence of sort of goth and rock and alternative music and that sort of thing. And clubs were affordable. You could still afford to go out for a night out. And I suppose at that point, I found that I was sort of, how can you put it, enjoying life a lot, doing a lot of clubbing, and meeting lots and lots of people. But sexually, I wasn't sort of that interested on whether it was boys or girls, but I wasn't outwardly out, if that makes sense, because in those days, if you were out, you'd probably end up being beaten up. So
Right.
you were very, very sort of closeted, but you did find yourself sort of mixing around nice people. Nothing particularly naughty. It was just a nicer community, if that makes sense. And if you were
Well, there's
sort of,
definitely an exploration, right? I mean,
yeah,
and
definitely.
in that environment, it's, I would think, a little easier to explore than others.
Yeah, and you have to be bloody careful as well, because none of us knew about AIDS at that point.
Yeah.
So, of course, as time progressed, we entered the spectre of the whole explosion around AIDS, and that drove anyone that was slightly nonconformist underground for fear of trouble.
Yeah.
And we know the disaster, and we know the horrors that then pursued, and the social stigma around anyone that was seen to be bisexual, gay, or not acting in the correct manner. Almost could be ridiculed with their peers, etc., for fear of being deviant. So anyway, that goes on quite a long way. And then I met my partner. I've various flings, actually, to be honest with you. Some very, very gorgeous people. And we had wonderful times. And I was at home cooking oven chips in my flat. And my best mate, we used to share a flat in the city. And we did it to save money because he was always absolutely useless with money. You know, he's absolutely useless when you get a knock on the door and the man comes to take away the television because he's not paid the rent and it's the one thing he's got to pay. So you're thinking, that's great, isn't it? For fuck's sake. Use my French. Black and white portables and people trying to cut your gas off. But still, never mind. We got through that, sorted it out. So anyway, he picked up this girl from work who thought he was a bit of a Jack the Lad. And she met me and we ended up getting married. I stole his girlfriend.
Is that how he paid you back for all the rent?
Yeah, well, she binned him off inside of about 10 minutes, to be honest, when she met me. But she had this, because the deputy managers in the store where we were working were women, they always perceived that Steve's flatmate was a woman, you see. So she thought it was a safe bet to go back home because he obviously shares the flat with a woman. But my name is dual purposed. So when she walked through the door and goes, it's a bloke. so instantly it was like, he's a bit of all right, isn't he? And she sort of basically binned him off. So that was that. But needless to say, we were married for 30 years. We had a fantastic relationship, some gorgeous children, lots and lots of happy memories. But during that time, we were both slightly, how can you put it? We enjoyed life and we enjoyed people and the social side of it. And we did have one or two naughty swings at the time, you know, I'm going back quite a long time, actually. But it was more of a curiosity thing, if that makes sense. But as time progressed, I sort of more and more had these flashbacks to my, how can you put it? Not definitely wired 50-50. Didn't know what was going on, but did know that I did enjoy wearing lingerie, which started a sort of more of a curious side of things. And she got it. She worked it out, probably way before I did. And the effects that it had on me in the bedroom, etc. And didn't exactly shut down Tina, but sort of nurtured Tina. And we both realised that things were different. But it opened the door for us to be able to do things, but we had to be really, really careful. So obviously we had to hide everything from the children. And that brings me on to when our children were younger, there were times where we'd organise to go to events and things like that. And, you know, little people's illnesses, little people's health would sometimes preclude things.
I know a little bit about that.
Which is why I'm mentioning it, actually, because walk a mile in my shoes, darling. Especially those hills.
I absolutely can't.
But it's something I think it's good to share with people generally, is the fact that when you are at that situation where, you know, you've got, you know, how can you put it? Oh, the tension's there, the excitement's there, the anticipation's there, and then a little person goes horribly ill for some reason or goes wrong. Yeah. And I always say this mantra, family first. And, you know, we stood by that, even though, you know, you've seen the film Jurassic Park?
Yeah.
And you've seen sort of what a velociraptor can look like when he's rather annoyed. and inside, the two of you are like that. at the same time smiling, petting, and hugging, and making sure that little people are okay. But it's something to bear in mind that never forget family first.
Right. We struggle with that a lot. I think I sometimes struggle with that. Maybe sometimes more than Mr. Snow. Well, maybe in a different way, but that whole concept of I'm in parent mode, I'm in mom mode, right? Like I have to, what am I making the kids for dinner, and what am I making sure they have to get this ready for school tomorrow? And like you're just kind of in that space. And then, Mr. Snow comes up as a horny teenage boy. It just wants to start humping my leg. And I'm like, I can't go from one to the other. As quickly, I think.
But that's exactly the same situation that me and my good lady had.
Yeah.
Because what happens is that your frontal lobe on the male is like wired, straightforward, boing, sex, right? And the lady's frontal lobe is divided, children, task, and then somewhere in the corner is that bit that goes, and when the right buttons are pressed, the sex bit will come across. But at the moment, if you keep going on like that, I'm just going to be child and food mode. And will you stop humping my leg? I'm going to slap your tail.
I know. I have to get that rolled up newspaper and smack him on the nose.
You were talking about newspapers. We don't seem to have newspapers in this country anymore.
Oh, really?
Well, we do, but they're so damned expensive that most people use them and cut them up for toilet paper when they finish these days. Brings back memories of the pandemic, that does, I swear there are people in this country that bought toilet rolls during the pandemic, and in the year 2035, they will finally be announcing with a blue plaque on the front of their house that they've used their last bog roll from the pandemic. But still. Anyway, so that was Tina up to probably about 20 years ago. So we had all of the frustrations of wanting to go places and having to balance it all out, hide it in our jobs, because obviously from a career point of view, if you are, how can one put it, seen not to comply with the company corporate principles, you could be deemed to be a deviant. You could be a deviant. You could be polluting other people with your weirdness and your immoral views on life, and the fact you're having more fun than I am.
That's isn't that our goal in life?
Especially if you're in public roles. And I totally get that. And whilst society is more accepting, you have to remember that it's still very, very much an early journey for a lot of people. Okay, I get RuPaul's Drag Race has been all over the world now and is flying the flag and saying how amazing everyone is. But at the same time, a lot of people like to know, but they don't actually want it on their doorstep, do they?
Yeah.
The fear of rest of the family finding out.
It's more in like an entertainment context. It's not even real. It's in this entertainment over dramatized fashion that is not real life.
It's not real, but how can I put this? It's meant that people that cross-dress, and I use it very well actually in my particular community, because I will go out as Tina, and as far as my neighbours are concerned, I do drag.
Mm-hmm.
And I say to them, because they say to me, is that what you wear to drag? And I sort of go, no, but I can't turn up at a gig in male mode, so I go in Tina mode and I change at the gig. And as far as they're concerned, I look like something off RuPaul, which is complete and utter rubbish because I don't. But it makes it palatable for them.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Although it can be quite interesting because I was recently driving my car and as I think you're aware from certain forums, the car is not exactly inconspicuous. And I was spotted and received a phone call this week from a friend in Bolton turning around and saying, is there a new lady in your life? Because I've heard reports and I've seen a picture of this particular lady. She looks like a bit somebody like Susie and the Banshees driving your car. And I said, yes. Are you mad? What are you letting her drive it for? And I'm like, because darlings, I didn't say darlings, but I was like, if only you fucking knew. Excuse my French. There we are. We're sort of probably coming up to about 10 years ago now, I would say. Tina goes out full time. Tina goes out of the bedroom. Tina starts hitting the clubs in a big way as Tina, as opposed to being what it was like before, although he was already in clubs then. And that's where sort of I discovered a place, and it had a dungeon underneath it. If you can imagine a great big shopping mall and a tiny little side street off the side with an inconspicuous little door leading to a den of iniquity, where people would be walking down the pavement, take a sharp left up a staircase and vanish into the ether. And it was a swingers club.
I wanted to vanish into the ether.
and how can I put this? The street that this club was on, was called Bond Street. I mean, and it was full of posh boutiques, and all of a sudden there's this church, what's the name they use for them now? An ecclesiastical shop, right? Okay, that sold things to enhance your ecclesiastical experience, whether it be new books or, particular articles and icons and things like that. You walk 2 doors down, left-hand stairs, up the stairs, wallop, you're in a swingers club. And you're thinking to yourself, oh, they used to park their car outside the front. And it was one of those ones with those sort of, how can you put it? It used to have religious statements on it. So you'd walk down from being in heaven as regards sexual antics to facing hell as you walk down the door, thinking, oh my God. Literally,
there's a lot to be. I don't think we have time to unpack that. and it's not like that's a lot of things.
So anyway, that was then, and then so the club had a dungeon. I had always had a kinky side to me with the BDSM side of things, as in kink and stuff like that. And that's where I started realizing that not only could I dress properly as Tina, but I could. How could you put it? I came across with this persona of being a dominatrix and not realizing that naturally I was quite a controlling person. And I started to sort of do demonstrations with my partner at the time. She really loved it. It was the most intimate sexual time we'd ever had with the sensual stuff, because we actually stopped the fighting in the bedroom over who's doing what. And we went into a dom sub role, and we discovered sensation, touch, play, not all the naughty bits, and we were waking up our bodies and our minds and getting incredibly excited by it, being exhibitionists, and other people wanted to learn. So that's what we did. And it just blossomed from there. At the same time, I was sort of party to quite a lot of online groups and stuff like that. So I was learning a lot of things and putting a lot of things into practice. But I was incredibly lucky because there were people that had watched what I was doing, and it sort of people naturally wanted to have a go, and they trusted me, and I'd learned about boundaries, respect, and reading people better and all that sort of thing. And it blossomed from there to the point where we used to do a thing called Fabulous Fridays, and I used to be in the dungeon from sort of 8 o'clock at night till 3 o'clock in the morning, never touched a drop of drink all the way through, and absolutely physically and mentally wasted at the end of it, but incredibly happy. And people used to love the demos, which was really good fun.
I think Mr. Snow, he's going to start a GoFundMe of bring Tina to the US for a demo.
That's a good idea.
I can see it now. He'll be talking to my brother who used to work for a freight liner. We had put in a bloody box and sent across him one of those poodle boxes or something underneath the passenger section of some blooming airliner, and then ejected over somewhere like Boston or something like that with a parachute to avoid customs, because if they saw what was in the bag, I'd probably be arrested on the spot by the feds. I can see it now.
And dear listener, if you want it to be a more humane trip than that.
Imagine if I landed and they looked in there and they goes, "Excuse me, is this your pass? Is this your baggage? Is it, sir, madam, thing, it, Tina?"
It?
I don't know. I am sure that customs have seen some things. I don't know if they would bat an eye at it.
I don't. I think they're
Well, maybe I
probably.
should clarify. What are you bringing over?
Well, I know a good lady friend of mine who actually has or was in a relationship with a gentleman for a very long time in the United States. And she packed the stuff in her bag. She was quite open and transparent about it all. And they promptly assumed that she was coming across to work. And she pointed out, I'm not working, I'm seeing my friend. And she had to justify and prove that she wasn't actually moving and going into the United States for immoral earnings. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because
Wow.
because of the quality of the gear she had in her bag was not cheap stuff, and
Wow.
and the bondage gear that she took and the toys. Honestly, I saw the pictures and I thought to myself, those are anatomically deforming, darling. And she probably turned around. I said, are you thinking about building a tunnel or something, my dearest? And she's like, no, Tina, that's one of the small ones. I'm like, oh, for Christ's sakes.
Wow, that's impressive. So what does that say about the United States Customs, that only the high-end stuff is a concern, not the cheap shit? Like, what does
Yeah,
that
I
mean?
think that basically means that if you've got a pair of cheap tacky cuffs and stuff and you're flying from one state to another, they're not
They're
going
like,
to be
whatever.
bothered. Yeah, but if you turn up with like fetters, suspension harnesses that cost 180 quid each.
Well, if you look like a professional, you might be one.
Well, that was the problem, but But anyway, I digress.
So, okay, so I have questions. So, with Dom and subplay and kink, you said that you and your wife, when you were together, started that together, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have very little knowledge in the Dom sub dynamic. I have heard about it. I have to some extent read about it, but I still can't. I don't feel like I can quite put my finger on it. And when I picture Dom sub play, I picture it being, in a way, mean. And that's I know that is not the correct word, but I almost picture it that way.
Yeah, you view it as somebody telling someone to do something, to degrade them, to
Degrade, right, or demeaning, yeah.
demean them, to force them into something, and to take them from a comfort zone to an awkward place, or literally just to become more dominant and directional. The funny thing is that whilst a lot of people perceive, how can you put it, the gentleman tied to the bed, gagged and blindfolded and strapped down on all four corners, and she's prancing around in a pair of bedroom heels with fishnets and a black leather uniform on with a funny looking hat with a whip going.
He's pretty excited.
Basically going up to her and going, you've been an extremely petulant little child, haven't you? And then I'm going to smack your ass and hurt. It's going to hurt. That's the last thing you actually do in that respect. When it comes to the first thing really is sort of, you don't have to act dominant to be dominant.
That's an interesting statement.
Because that can be a massive turnoff. If you find yourself in a situation where, how can you put it? You are both that relaxed and, please don't read too much into this one, but if you can imagine the lady's lying on the bed and you've got a silk scarf, for example, and you gently wrap it around her wrists and then you just test the water by feeding it through the back of the headboard and tying the other wrist so that she's sort of not rigid, or him for that matter. And you try that mild restraint type scenario, that starts to open doors of trust because one, she can get away from it straight away if she wants to, or he can. But two, you start to discover this thing and you start to role play these things together. And one thing can lead to another. But people's immediate perception of it's literally being hurting and hitting is completely the polar opposite to what it is. And it could just be that you develop a code word. And it's like, for example, with a lady that I'm aware of, all I need to do is walk past and whisper in her ear and just go, "You've been extremely naughty." And immediately she starts to sort of go, "Ooh," you know. But it's not all about whips and chains and hurting people. A lot of it is the sensual side of it. And it's also denial, in the sense being that they're expecting you to touch all their naughty bits. And that's the last thing you do. They're desperate for you to do that. They want you to, but you don't do it. So
you mentioned trust and control. And that's
trust in the sense being that you have to have your codes. So I always use sort of red, amber, green. And to be fair, my personal values are that I will go to amber with people, and at amber I will sort of sense check and see how things are and use the number scheme. So, for example, if we were doing a bit of impact, I'd sort of go on a scale of 1 to 10. What's that like? And you'd sort of go, and we, 3. Oh, higher, lower, higher. Game of cards. But never actually getting and thinking of it of being about breaking someone. You never want to break somebody. And if you take it to that point of conclusion where you've broken it and you've turned to red, you've ruined it because you've got nothing to move forward to.
Right.
If you keep holding it on amber and frustrating the bejeebers out of them, with them thinking, "Oh, I want more," but you don't let them have more, you naturally become the dominant because they want more, but you won't give it to them. But then if they weren't happy, if they weren't happy and they tapped out, for example, then you've broken it because you want them to be frustrated. At the same time, you can then sort of indulge in other things after you've had that little scenario where you can go into the reclaim side of things, shall we say.
Well, it's very much limit pushing, and it can be extreme, and kind of when you talk about trust and control, like those are very big words, and they mean so much. And I kind of giggle because you're talking about frustrating people and taking them to a point of them kind of, you're denying them to some degree some level of pleasure, and you're taking them to a point where they're just kind of very frustrated and very almost overwhelmed.
But emotionally and sensually aroused to such a point. I liken it to if you went to, use the correct term here, a candy store, and you were given free rein to try everything in the candy store. Okay? All you would do would overdose yourself on it and become violently ill and spend an awful lot of time either in the dentist chair or sitting on the toilet. And it's not an enjoyable experience. Whereas if you are led into the candy store, and let's say, for example, you try with something like just a straightforward paddle, for example, if we're talking about the candy store of kink, and you try a straightforward paddle, which has got fur on one side and leather on the other, and you basically concentrate on a little bit of impact with tapping the buttocks, for example, which replicates something else, if that makes sense. By the way, if you're not aware, this is an X-rated podcast. And by tapping the buttocks and lifting the buttocks, you replicate something else, don't you? If that makes sense. And if you get the rhythm right and the timing right, it could be almost akin to something else of a more personal and intimate nature, as an example. And you just learned that one skill. And you would then discover whether or not you liked it or you didn't like it. But it's not about pain, it's about sensation.
Right.
So
and I've kind of talked a little about this before, and I'm sitting here like just kind of, I am so impatient. I am not a patient person. And I think when I am in that place of being very aroused, I don't do well with people taking it away or not taking me to that place.
But you see, as a dominatrix, I'm the third wheel Because if you're in a situation where you've got a couple and you're educating a couple, at that point, when you've taken that person to that point of absolute pure sexual frustration, you release them and you turn around and say to the partner, you two go and get a room and come and see me in 2 hours. And normally they'll come back down and they'll be like, oh my God, he will look like he's been absolutely ripped to shreds. She will sit there with a rosy glow on her face with a great big smile. And the two of them will look knowingly and say absolutely nothing. I will sit there and smirk, sit back in the corner outside, put my feet on a table, take a large glass of tonic water and drink it, sit back, light and smoke a fag, and smile to myself. Another one done.
Yeah.
And
I think it wouldn't take long. Oh, Mr. Snow is so excited with himself right now. He's so pleased.
I'm going to set up that GoFundMe account right now.
I recall a situation that me and a very, very special lady in my life who we team up with, we've teamed up with over the last couple of years. As she is a lady dominatrix, I am a T-girl dominatrix, and we set about couples in the backlash bar at playgrounds. And I make a point of never touching naughty bits. And a lot of the ladies, which is bizarre these days, ladies are quite happy with other ladies touching other ladies, even if they're not outwardly bisexual. Because there's part of them, I think, sometimes that quite enjoys the whole thrill of the fact that another lady is touching them in a naughty manner. But when they're blindfolded, of course, it adds to that sense of mystery and excitement. And there have been quite a few situations where ladies have trusted Jay. She doesn't really mess about with naughty bits very much, but she knows exactly where to touch around them, if that makes sense, and bring them to such a sexual frenzy, whilst I'm either flogging their backs or smacking their bottoms or running pinwheels over them or running feathers over them and tickling them to hell. And then, of course, the end result is that they're that sexually aroused. We then release them, and then me and Jay sit back, slap the sky together, and then leave them to it. And it's rather lovely.
So do you get, obviously you get some type of pleasure out of that.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's weird because people say to me, what do you get out of it? And what I get out of it is people's trust in me is one massive adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
The fact that people trust a complete stranger in some eyes, and they watch demos, and there's people that there's regular people that have visited us and they love the whole sensation thing. And then there's other people that, you'll not get me in that bloody, oh, no, I'm not going to do any of that. Oh, no, never in a million years. Oh, no. And then the next minute, can I have a go? It's like, pardon? I'll have a go. Can I have a go, please?
I think so. I think this is a fantasy of mine, almost more than it is Mrs. Snow's. But like she mentioned, she's very impatient. And to watch her get stretched in terms of her patience is extremely fun.
That's not the only way you like to see me get stretched, for the record.
True, but that's not what we're talking about right now. So,
a bird in the hand, or is it a hand in the... No, sorry.
So, I think
that was rude.
To have her on, I always picture it on a St. Andrew's cross, but it could be a spanking table. It could be any number of things.
St. Andrew's cross is beautiful because a couple of reasons. If you, for example, use a St. Andrew's cross, okay, and especially if it's a decent one that's been padded properly and you're using the right sort of restraints, they can be so comfortable. And that whole thing about you're lying there against the cross, so your back is exposed, your front bits are all protected, so your nudity is preserved in that respect, okay, which adds to the frustration. And somebody is slowly, essentially working their way from the nape of the neck right the way down to the back of your heels with different objects and things. There's absolutely nothing you can do apart from take it. And he can join in and he can learn exactly how to trail his finger right the way from the nape of your neck, just underneath your hairline, down your spine, all the way around underneath your ribs, all the way down and round over your hips, and back up again without touching any naughty bits. You want to rip the thing off the wall.
Okay, that's enough for today, guys. We got to go.
Go get a room. No, I really think to watch her in that environment, just like you described.
It's wonderful. The number of guys that watch their partners, they trust us with their partners
Yeah.
to do this. And they are so worked up and so excited to watch the responses, to hear the responses. You know, it's far better than any of those adult internet websites.
Oh my gosh, yes. Because I know first of all, exhibitionism is kind of one of our things.
Right.
So to watch her completely naked on one of these St. Andrew's crosses, being teased this way, driven absolutely crazy in front of an audience, it is so hot to picture that. I think it would drive her crazy.
I think you're right. I mean, just the idea of it is kind of like, wow, that would be.
One of the beauties is the fact that when we did the Backlash Barn at Playgrounds, I used to have lots and lots of chairs, and people would walk in there and it was like church. They'd all sit there for the service.
It's like church.
And God forbid anyone who started a conversation and ruined the atmosphere, because the atmosphere is also something else. You know, you don't want to be sitting there listening to the latest F1 scores or the latest football scores whilst you're in the middle of trying to take someone into a really, really personal, deep, intense space. So it has been known for me to lose my stuff with people and basically turn around and go, if you don't shut up, you're next. Go and stand in the corner, face the corner, and go and think about your actions and think about the impact you're having on the rest of the group. If you can't shut up, get out. And
wow, like that voice really just, it's like, shit, I got to straighten up.
Well, am I correct? You would describe this as a scene. This would be called a scene, right?
It's a scene.
There's etiquette to this.
Oh, God, yes.
I mean, you don't just casually wander in and observe it. There's etiquette to being a party to this.
Mm-hmm.
We were lucky enough the other evening to visit a particular place that I've not been to for a very long time with a very nice lady and some friends. And they've got a dungeon, and they're clever enough to set the dungeon up in a swingers club on a separate floor downstairs, tucked away in an alcove, so it's not on the main thoroughfare, so that you can create that atmosphere. And by the time people have walked into the room, they've walked past some pretty scary implements that look like something from the Spanish Inquisition, which is enough to make anyone shut up. So, of course, they stumbled upon us in the corner, and we were doing a sensual demo thing, which was incredibly naughty, very nice. And, of course, they'd already sort of adopted the correct persona, apart from one person, who I just stopped and looked and lifted my finger to my lips and pierced into the back of his skull with my eyes and went, shh. He lowered his head. His friends looked at each other, and they very quietly walked backwards, back from the area, and disappeared. I don't know what happened to them, but how can you put it? I did see them later, and they looked rather sheepish. I wasn't looking particularly scary, but sometimes it's how you act in that situation where you don't need to get into a big argument. It's how you can sort of convey a thought without making it heavily verbal. Perhaps a raised eyebrow is very good as well.
One of the concerns that I have, and we've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, like this desire, I don't, at least the first time or two, I don't want to be the person administering the teasing. For two reasons. First of all, I've never done it, and I don't want to
muck it up.
Well, yeah, and particularly for any sort of impact play, I don't know a lot, but I'm smart enough to know there's a right way to do that and a very wrong way to do that.
There is actually some really, really good resources in your part of the world on a particular website called FetLife, okay, which is predominantly around kink, BDSM, and different interests within the lifestyle around that side of things. And there are things called munches, which you can attend as curious people, which are social munches, where you can meet people from the community firsthand, and you can openly turn around and you can openly ask questions at these particular things face to face with people. Once you've built up the trust of the fact that you're not a reporter for the New York, whatever, you know
I
what I
think
mean?
the New York Times would be much better if they actually reported on this kind of stuff.
I'd read it.
I'd read it. Yeah, right.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? What munches are really, really good because they are purely social. There's no expectations for anything, but you can find out about different things and talk face to face with people. And you might get the opening to go to one or two organized events where you can go and watch. And if you can go and watch, there are people there that may well be holding workshops to sort of say, well, okay, here's a flogger. This is how you can hold it. This is how you can do this. And actually give you some practical 101 on how to use the equipment. In this country, again, it's very much a question of going to munches, networking with people, and then certain people like myself and stuff, I always say where I'm going or if I'm going somewhere. And people have messaged me and said, you know, I see you're going so-and-so on Friday. Is there any? Yeah, fine, no problem. You know, I'll quite happily give you a lesson and show you what to do. As you probably heard from my activities on the other podcast, 1 minute I'm Frankenfurter, next minute I'm upstairs flogging Mr. Naughty. But that was totally bizarre because none of that was planned. But in my mind, I'm always very conscious of not drinking alcohol if I'm going to be demoing. And that evening, at that point, I'd successfully managed to lubricate myself on Schweppes tonic water all night. Yeah, it's all good fun. But munches are brilliant for meeting people to actually network with. And there is quite a big network over there. Although I do have to sort of bear in mind that, how can I put it? Distances between places could be slightly larger than they are in places like this. So if I said I was going to go and see someone in near London, it would take me about an hour and a half. Whereas for you, going to munch might take 3 hours.
Yeah, and that's so difficult for us for all the reasons we talked about earlier. It's
exactly, especially when it comes to balancing your work life family situation.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that again, we always go back to it, but the name of the podcast is Scheduling Sin, and that's the reason. It's because the balancing our real life and our naughty life is always such a difficult thing to do.
I mean, the idea of just like going across the country for a demo,
which I would absolutely do. Well, absolutely, had we not have these obligations in our lives, I would absolutely do that.
But you have to remember that as time goes on, you're at the very, very beginning of your journey. And as time goes on, these opportunities become easier as the smaller drains on your resources become larger financial drains on your resources for things like telephones and cars and houses and pets.
Just eye rolling.
None of that is any fun at all.
But the Scheduling Sin, I draw so many parallels to where I was at your ages and where so many people are and why the frustration sets in. And that's so important that you keep the communication open between yourselves and you both agree that it isn't anyone's fault you can't do something. Because that's one of the big things that a lot of couples get wrong, is that it's almost like she's deliberately poisoned the children. And it's all of the evil thoughts will creep in when things go wrong, because there will be that whole scenario of, one, the frustration, two, the blue testicles, 3, the frustrated labia, and
right. Thank you for, because labias get frustrated too.
Exactly. And both realize that it is nobody's fault. And remember that in the darkest moments, because I've been there. I've walked a mile in those shoes. And it's so important that you keep that communication open and realize that, it happens. It's fine. There will be other opportunities, and they'll be even better than you first thought.
Right. We've had a lot of conversations related to expectations. I think when we first got into this and we were a little bit more active and we were seeking out individuals to play with, whether it was a single male or another couple. And then, finally the stars align and our schedules match up and we're able to do something, then I feel like we've had a lot of conversations about expectations. Well, it takes forever for us to actually get this to happen. So we need to quote unquote make the most of this and figure out, how we want to do this. And in doing that, you put so much pressure on yourself, on each other, on other people that it may not be a good fit for a variety of reasons. And so it's a lot of almost just, you just kind of mind fuck yourself a little bit.
Well, what happens is, and a beautiful thing that I use, and I say this to everybody and everything I ever go to, that is, I always go to any event with absolutely no expectations whatsoever, because the moment you create an agenda, you create disappointment and pressure. If you do what I do, admittedly, no, you don't want to do what I do. End up patrolling a car park in the middle of a summer evening, sorting out a queue, running around going, I'm awfully sorry, darlings. I'm afraid there's only one checkout open at the front of the club, darlings. By the way, do I know you? And I'm sure I've met you somewhere before. Oh, no, sorry, you're straight, aren't you? You've got a doppelganger, haven't you? And but that evening, that I did the first V2V there, there were people there that were like, oh my God, they've let her in. That's the end of it. But also, we ended up having some fantastic times because no expectation whatsoever.
Yeah.
There were other people there that I know, having watched certain Discord chats and everything else, that the expectation was that, how can you put it? We were going to turn coal into diamonds. We were going to discover nuclear fission on Wednesday afternoon at 4 p.m. They created everything and put so much pressure on themselves that there was almost like this unnecessary tension.
Kind of doomed to fail.
Totally, mate. Absolutely, totally. Yeah. And you see a lot of it, a lot of expectations on a lot of group chats. And it's lovely to just sort of banter along with it. But like I always say, never go with a plan. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. Still have a good night. And make friends for the future if something doesn't happen that evening, because you'll be surprised. A lot of people that you may say, we're going to meet, we're going to play, you may well meet them. You may end up spending the evening talking together, but nobody wants to pop that bubble question and go, should we go and get a room? Because they don't want to ruin the fun that they've started with.
Right.
Socially. And then when you do meet them and you stay friends afterwards, you've tested that trust and you built that real trust. And the next time you meet them, I'll tell you what, Caligula would have blushed, honestly.
Well, and what can happen, and I've run into this because I have done it, is you can ruin what would have otherwise been a great time because you were so focused on what you didn't do.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, though, from the managing expectations standpoint, it is easy advice in the sober light of day
Yeah.
to say that we're going to go with no expectations and whatever happens or doesn't happen is great. But we're only going to go to 2 events a year. And this one is 3 months away. And we're working on our outfits now. It is so hard to balance that. I mean, it's really good advice to keep in.
In which case, you both abstained from any carnal pleasures for about 2 weeks beforehand.
Not a chance. But what I can tell you, is this:
if you took my advice, darlings, and you abstained for 2 weeks, both of you, and then you did go to the event, even if you didn't meet anybody else, you'd still knock your brains out.
Well, that's true, and you're right about that. We did break this rule.
I'll have a word with the Vanessa Vixen actually, and see whether or not we can get you ordered a cage.
So we broke this rule just a little bit, and we decided we would come up with 3 lists. We've got a hotel takeover in a few weeks, and we came up with 3 lists. One of them was a guaranteed list. One of them was a likely list, and one of them was a wide chance list. And on the guaranteed list is that we're going to go and we're going to watch Mrs. Snow prance around a hotel in not much. And at a minimum, she and I are going to have a fantastic time together. And that I can pretty well guarantee. And if just that happens, I personally will leave very happy.
Yes, I would enjoy that. I enjoy you watching me prance. I prance for you.
So I think we kind of go into these things because we enjoy the exhibitionism.
Can I just ask a question? You know, if it's an entire hotel takeover,
it is.
It is.
Right. What time of the year is this? What's the weather going to be like?
Cold. It's October 20th.
Oh, right. Yeah. I'm out that night, actually. Oh, right.
You're not going to be in Ohio, are you?
No, I'm going to be a rock horror night.
Okay.
Well, that's fun.
Now, part of me wants to go dressed as Elvira.
Well, that's the obvious choice, right?
I would do the gold underwear.
Well, you see, this is the problem, but then they're saying it's a Rocky Horror Night. So I'm going to have to go as Frankenfurter again or Tina Furter because everyone just knocks one out when they see that outfit. Although I was walking through the streets of a city dressed like that, which caused a bit of a scene. Nearly caused it.
You'll need to post some pictures of that in the Discord.
I think there is a photo of me up there.
I have to look.
With Delicious Debs or whatever. But I totally get the whole thing. But what I was going to say was, do you know how incredibly sexy it is to be wearing underwear with a large coat outside? And to go for a walk around the hotel gardens, knowing that underneath that large coat, you are dressed to impress and only one person's going to get anywhere near it. And then beckon him across from outside the bushes and make sure he doesn't slip over. You can see it now, can't you? He comes running towards you, slips on the ice, goes A over T, slides straight between your legs. Straight between your legs, and you're going, oh, God, this hasn't exactly worked out how we planned this one, is it? A bit of outdoor naughty canoodling.
Well, we've definitely had some outdoor naughty canoodling. Never in the cold. Well, I shouldn't say we've actually had some in the cold, but I mean, we've had some.
Well, I mean, don't worry
outside.
Don't worry about frozen assets because they soon warm up. I can tell you. Yeah. So where are we now? Let me think. So if we go back to the story of Tina, so Tina then ends up in a situation where me and my wonderful wife, who we separated about 5 years ago now, we both reached the conclusion that we'd grown apart, but not grown totally out of love. But our interests were so diverse between the two of us. She likes an alpha male, so do I. We ended up fighting over them. But joking apart, even our children said our marriage didn't die. It sort of completed. It ran its natural course. We're now in that crazy situation where we go out as groups together. So Tina will go out with her friends, and my ex-wife will come, her partner will come, the children will come. They all join us together. It's a rather bizarre situation. We're all really, really good mates. It's totally, I still pinch myself that we've managed to get to that situation. 9 times out of 10, when it comes to marriages and relationships breaking down, hell would freeze over before the other parties would talk to each other, for example.
Yeah.
But so when we do see each other, we have had some rather amusing situations at certain parties, for example, where if you can picture, Mistress Tina is, how can you put it, in connection with somebody at the same time as my ex-wife is slightly across the room in connection with someone else. And we have had a rather interesting scenario. We ended up playing these people off against each other because at the end of it, the lady turned around and went, "Oh my God, how did you learn to do that?" And I looked across to my ex as my ex, the person that she was playing with, went, "Oh my God, I've never had a BJ like that before. Where did you learn that?" To which she looked across at me. The two of us then punched the skies together and they went, "Do you know each other?" And we sort of announced that we've been married for 30 years. As she turned around and said, "I'd learnt that one from the best in the business." And I said, "I learnt that likewise." And the two people sat there going, "Hold on, we've just been played."
Yeah. Right. What just happened?
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's right. That's the correct response. You were welcome.
To which everyone just laughed. Everyone else was in the know knew, but we decided for the sake of chemistry and atmosphere that we weren't going to sort of tell any newbies because they wouldn't understand the fact that how can a tea girl and her ex-wife go to the same party. Those that knew, and they were just dead relaxed around us, and there was no cause for conversation. But a lot of people that were there may well have sort of gone, "Oh, what do I do? What do I say?" And that's the last thing you need. You don't need that. You know what I mean? So it was quite funny.
That's fascinating.
It was quite. I noticed there was a question about tractors from a certain person who put that on your question.
That came in through Discord.
For the benefit of that person, if I get invited back, I will explain all about tractors for you. At the moment, I think we'll just stick with nationals, internationals, and caterpillars, darling. And we'll leave it at that, shall we? Thank you.
Oh, there's something to go back to. There's something to go back to there on a future conversation.
Well, that just goes to show that we have to have you back.
Just to wind things up, actually. So what's been happening with Tina since then? So obviously, been out and about for quite a few years, different clubs, as you probably heard, America, from the rest of the Vanilla to Vixen podcast. I do get around a bit and I've met some amazing people, and I still pinch myself every day to think of the wonderful connections that I've had and the wonderful people I've met, as well as the other side of the community where you are helping a lot of people, because I do get messages from people. A lot of straight gentlemen find it difficult to accept the fact that I'm actually a single guy as well. Because although I present as a tea girl wearing a dress and a frock, I am still emotionally, part of me is still a single gentleman. But they view me as being this sort of scary creature that you can't talk to because they're not sure whether I'm going to eat them or whether I'm going to shag them.
Well, do you have a preference between eating and shagging? Like, is that?
But you see, I love women as well. So this is where the confusion comes. Because half of my mind is wired like a lady. And I've got some incredibly lovely people that are incredibly special to me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are some amazing guys on the scene that you sort of quietly, in a distance, you want to mentor and nurture them because you think, I was you once. I made those same monumental fuck-ups. Let me help you with your fuck-ups and let me help you redeem yourself, creature.
So do you typically play? I mean, like, what does that look like for Tina? I mean,
Kinky.
other than doing more of the
Do I play? Do I play? It's an enigma because there are days where I will be a complete, utter slut.
Oh.
I will go to a club, okay, certain club. I will announce that I'm going on a certain website for a certain particular genre of human, and I will turn up, and it will be pretty damned obvious that all I'm interested in is getting absolutely rogered senseless and enjoying every second of it.
Okay.
And it doesn't
spirit
happen.
Animal.
It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's rather lovely. And then I will have sated my need, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Then there are other times where, for example, I will go clubbing, doing demos. There are other times where I'll be like a drag artist and quite happily sit around all afternoon making people laugh, crack jokes, and get them talking. And then there are other evenings where I will disappear off the radar and pop up somewhere with someone and have a really lovely romantic evening. And again, with absolutely no expectations, and then end up with an extremely large smile on our faces and do date nights, proper ones. Him and her, not Tina and her or whatever. So I get the best of everything.
Is he going to get the best of both, like all of the worlds?
Well, that's kind of an interesting, and this may be a great way to end this one, but because it really is our interest in kink. I don't know that we've really explored it that much, but I think it has some real potential for us because as we've gotten further into the lifestyle, we have found that what it has done for us sexually, it has really opened our minds. Physically, you can do a lot of things, touching and all those things, and that's great. But the lifestyle and the things around it have engaged our minds far more than
you ever thought possible.
Exactly. And I think kink, you never know. I don't want to put a cap on anything, but I don't see us going down the leather road and all those things necessarily. But I think
I can see, listening to what you're saying and the way that you two are interacting, the switching of the power, as in understanding where you sit with your daily lives and your private lives and what you'd like to do, if that makes sense. As in, you talked about, your good lady being very impatient. At the same time, the art of edging to that degree could be very, very nice and powerful for you, and also incredibly frustrating and actually very, very enjoyable when you do finally reach that magic moment of satisfaction, shall we say. And then from your point of view, not necessarily the whips and chains and being beaten senseless, but being, how can you put it, essentially head fucked slightly would probably be an incredible turn on for you.
Well, would. And for us, I see it as stretching. That's the only term I can think to use is stretching. And
pushing limits.
And what I mean by that is watching, particularly Mrs. Snow, watching her explore new parts of herself is so exciting for me.
Well, you watching me be sexual, I mean, and me being sexual for you in like a showing way, like we really get off of that. Like that's something that you and I really enjoy each other. And that's just something that we really love to do.
Your hotel takeover thing and the fact that you can be a bit of an exhibitionist and a bit of a flaunt is going to be an incredible turn on for you.
Oh, I think so.
And
I think so. And
you're going to be like a dog with two tails with the most beautiful woman in the whole place. And you're going to yourself, and she's mine.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yes. Yeah, no, you can all play, but she's going home with me, gentlemen.
Yeah, he may enjoy that a lot. Yeah.
It's sort of like I feel about kink today, like I felt about the lifestyle probably a few years ago before we started into it. I was aware of it, but it was really pretty foggy.
Well, and we jump. I mean, similarly, we would jump to conclusions or think we know certain things and realize that we knew nothing about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think it's wonderful the fact that people can sit here and listen to this sort of thing and open their minds to things that they've never dreamed of or they've perceived as being one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they're thinking to themselves, well, that's not what it says on the book cover.
Yeah.
That's not what it says. I've opened that book and that picture on the cover looks nothing like what's inside. This is completely different. Wow. Oh, right. Okay. So you're not whipping them senselessly, making them look like someone on a cross, and making them look like they've just been ripped to shreds by the Roman Empire. This is, and people are enjoying it as well. Hold on. How does this work? This doesn't compute. Oh, right. Okay. And it goes on like that.
But it's another opportunity for that stretching. It's another opportunity for you to be, for your world to be a little bit bigger than it was before.
Mentally, physically, and richer.
Yeah, agreed.
Evolution, right? We've talked about that, like evolving, and how we individually have evolved in this process. We as a couple, but I think this kind of is a part of that evolution. You're kind of learning more about, because at the end of the day, you're learning more about these, practices or whatever, but you're really learning more about yourself, and you're learning more about yourself in your relationship with your partner.
I liken it to a question that I had with somebody and turned around and said to them, okay, so a year ago, did you ever think you would be doing this podcast, still doing it, having met a T-girl, having discovered that T-girls can be dominatrixes, that T-girls aren't going to try and jump your husband and shag them, even if they're straight, and that T-girls...
You can, by the way.
T-girls, okay, whilst a lot of people say to themselves, how do I address you, Tina? What's your pronoun? I don't want to offend you. I need to understand where this comes from. A lot of us aren't that worried about the actual pronouns. There are some real extremes in our world, and a lot of club owners will use the description of T-girls, which is actually quite a reasonably endearing term because it covers a multitude of sins. Within our community, you have people that are very happy to dress in very sensual materials, and you could class that perhaps as people that are happy to dress in different attire to their gender, and they could be classed as transvestites, but they don't want to change their life. They don't want to chop bits off, but they're very happy to be able to, wear those clothes, but not necessarily go out in them. And they could be classed as cross-dressers or transvestites. There are some transvestites that like to live their life outside publicly. There are T-girls who cover a multitude of sins. Some of us are very, very happy with being two identities, where we can quite happily be male or female, but inside there is still a passion for dressing and presenting accordingly. And then there is the more interesting side of things, where there are people that are transitioning, for example. So you have to be very, very careful about people that are transitioning, because they've made that life-changing decision that they want to change their bodies and they want to revert to what they really are inside. Because you've got to remember that in most cases, they are people that are in the wrong body, and it's a situation that's occurred, but underneath it all, you would look at them and turn around and go, yes, you are definitely not how you were born into this world. You are definitely presenting more as your desired gender, which is a polite way of putting it. And then, of course, you've got Tinas. Now, Tinas are a liability. They are... Number one, socially inept, guaranteed to cause a scene in a club, walk into the most heterosexual environment going and ask them to pull a pint, and then look around as if to say, what's the matter? You're not seen one of us before, have you? And then generally probably jump into a racing car, scream off down the street, and then when they get pulled, have you got your identification? It looks nothing like you, sir, madam. What the hell have we got here? Thank you.
Well, we're certainly glad that you came and made a scene on our podcast today.
Absolutely.
We had a wonderful time.
It's good fun, isn't it? Right. Should we switch off the microphone now and go, oh my God, what are we going to do with this lot?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is the panic part. No, I was going to say that Tina is a part of our Discord server. And if you wanted to come and talk to Tina for yourself, you could come join us there. And the links are in the show notes for that.
Yes. And we always enjoy getting our lovely photos of Miss Tina.
If I will say genuinely that if people have got genuine questions, queries, or anything like that, I have around me a wonderful network of people I've met. And you can, in confidence, ask me. I will respect your confidence. I will not go shouting it around the place. And I will do my very damnedest to try and help people, because one of the most rewarding things is when you see people blossom and you see them having that question that's been itching that they daren't ask answered. It's just wonderful to help people in our community, regardless of situations, because do you know what? We've all got skeletons, we've all got demons, and sometimes it's just lovely to be able to just ask those questions. We may not be able to fix them, but we may be able to help them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate your time and we look forward to having you on again in the future.
I've just been informed that piece of string that runs from Land's End right the way across the ocean, all the way through to the end, with that other piece of string at the end, evidently is starting to get rather worn out now. So I think
who would have thought we could manage tin cans that far?
You'd be surprised what you could do. The only thing I will say is if it's a Chris coated on the end, I'd be extremely worried. And I'll leave you on that note. See you later.
We want to hear from you. Email us at snowmilf@yahoo.com. That's SNOMILF@yahoo.com. You can also join us on our Discord and have some fun interactive conversations with us. The link is in the show notes. Talk to you soon.
So I get this message on Kik from this guy that drives a dump truck in a quarry in Queensland, right? Because he's seen me on a particular forum and he's seen me on Flickr, because I've got a Flickr account. And he's seen pictures, obviously, of provocative certain images. So he starts up a conversation with me in Queensland, Australia, and he drives one of them great big yellow dump trucks in a quarry with wheels the size of a house on it, and a cab the size of a church, and a bin on the back that's the size of a bloody ocean liner. And so we spark off this thing, and he's got this whole thing about legs and nylon and heels, chicks with dicks and all that business, and what a naughty boy he is. And then randomly, another person from Queensland in a quarry messages me. And he's seen me on Flickr. And I'm thinking, oh, this is good. And he's got a thing about particular ladies with extra large bits and bobs downstairs and fancies about being told he's a naughty boy. And he drives a large yellow dump truck with wheels the size of fucking houses and a cab the size of a cathedral and a bin the size of an ocean liner. And he sends me a picture of his cab. And he sends me a picture of him doing something very naughty in his cab when he should be driving. And the other one does as well. The only problem is I mixed the fucking names up, sent the pictures back to the wrong people. The only problem being that they both work in the same fucking quarry. And luckily, I managed to bullshit it and turn around and say I got a picture off the internet, because I showed you, oh, your dumper truck looks gorgeous this morning, darling. Have you polished your wheels? And I bet your nuts are tight. And so, of course, the problem is it's got like 789 written on the side. And his is like 684. And I'm like, fuck. And he goes, do you, how, why, and all this business. So I've just got it off the internet, darling. I was looking for a nice picture of a polished truck for you. And of course, he's fucking paranoid now, isn't he? Then his mate goes, why have I got 684 for a picture? I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, darling. I went on the internet And he went, "Where did you go? What was the website?" At that point, crashed it, didn't I? I said, it's an incredibly small world, isn't it? I think you two better compare notes on me. so, so they got together on New Year's Eve and they sent me the extremely naughty video. The two of them stood by their trucks going, "Wank over this then, Tina." And I'm like, "Oh, you mates now?" "Yeah, we both want to do, yeah." And I'm like, "Oh, fine, darling, pay the Qantas flight. I'll be there."